Ex-inmates, what was the stupidest thing you've seen a new inmate do on his first day in prison? Story 1. There were 6 of us per cell, 3 thin metal bunks drilled against the left and right side walls, about 3 feet apart in height between each bunk. The bottom bunk was 3 feet off the ground as well, and we only had 1 empty bunk left on my side, and that was like a 9-foot climb to get on it. The 6th guy gets admitted in and starts demanding a bottom bunk, which I had one of them already. Now, he was about 5'8", maybe 140 pounds, and mind you, I'm 6'2", 215 pounds, so he looked pretty small compared to me. The guy on the other bottom bunk was much bigger than I am. Dude was easily around 6'6", probably pushing around 260 pounds. We both just stared at him, and then he grabbed the phone in the cell and started slamming it repeatedly against the box since we weren't paying attention to him. He must have watched some sort of movie or stupid prison guide or something, because he went straight for the other guy screaming and yelling. And the big dude then got up from the bunk and walked towards him looking like a damn grizzly bear. He snatched the phone out of his hand and smacked him across the face with it. He must have knocked the soul out of the little guy because he had him sitting on the toilet for like 2 or 3 days straight, only getting up when one of us had to use it. His cheek was bruised for days, and he tried to sneak up to the top bunk in the middle of the night once, and the big dude grabbed him by his pants and pulled him straight off, and he hit the floor pretty hard next to me. And the guy told him to go sit back down. He then requested a cell change, and of course, it was denied. All in all, it was one hell of a warm welcoming. Somewhere along the way, this little guy got some bad advice on what to do when you get to prison. I could be wrong since I've never been to prison, but I don't think disrespecting your much larger cellmates is the right strategy. What did he exactly think would happen when he tried to crazy his way to the bunk of his choice? There is nothing like getting slapped across the face with a phone that will set you back on the straight and narrow. Story 2. More stupid employee. A good friend Steve worked as a locksmith for a medium security prison, a really unpleasant job apparently. He bid on and got the job as groundskeeper. He was the only actual prison employee, and his 4-man staff were trustee prisoners. The job was overseeing grounds using tractors, hand mowers, and lawn equipment. Some minor repairs were allowed, and the shop had tools for repairs. The groundskeeping hut was not on the actual prison grounds, but had its own unmonitored employee driveway and employee entrance. There was a separate locked fence driveway that went directly into the prison. This was how the prisoners and equipment came and went. Now, the trustees were only searched when they returned to the prison grounds, either on the mowers or returning to their cells. Otherwise, the groundskeeping hut was not frequently inspected. It was a plumber-prisoner job. My friend bought an older Harley, which ran but not well. One of the trustees was a Made Motorcycle Gang member, and my friend and he bonded over motorcycles. One day, Steve brought his motorcycle to work and showed it to the trustee. The trustee listened to the motor and said the bike needed bearings, which means an overhaul, a $4,000 job. If Steve could bring the crew in an hour or two before they were supposed to return to their cells, the trustee felt that he could use that extra hour to overhaul the bike in a few weeks. And in the first few days, he totally disassembled the Harley's motor. Later that day, while returning to the prison, the trustee got caught smuggling in a small screwdriver, which meant his trustee crew would never return. Steve knew the groundskeeping hut would be inspected the next morning, and he got the motorcycle frame and wheels onto a pickup and took it to the shop. He didn't have time to get the motor parts, which he could claim were leftover lawnmower parts, but he knew that unmistakable motorcycle frame with wheels was his termination. The next day, the inspectors glanced at the part, made him took all the extra parts to a secure dumpster. He was reprimanded for not inventorying tools daily and having loose mower parts. The Harley was toast, but he actually kept his job. Story 3. I got a bunk restriction while I was in jail on one of my first nights. Twice a day, they did roll calls where we all had to sit on our bunk and to be quiet while the officer came bunk to bunk and checked all of our wristbands and made sure we were who we were. Halfway through he was doing this, someone rips the loudest, fattest, longest wet fart I've ever heard in my life. Now me, having the mind of a 5-year-old, burst into laughter. I've never heard a fart like this in my life. A few other guys laugh, but not even thinking of it, now I giggle about it. Anyways, the officer is like, all right, I'll settle down, but I can't stop laughing about it if he tells me to calm down, but I tell him through my tears of laughter, I literally cannot help it. I really couldn't. It was the funniest thing that happened the few days I was in there. Anyway, he gets pissed and I try to explain, hey, I'm not trying to be rude and disobey him through my laughter, but he isn't having it. Luckily, he just gave me bunk restriction and didn't punish everyone, but I could see the TV from my bunk, so I just hung out there for the rest of the night. Story 4. Jammed the toilet full of a big wad of paper. Cell was on a top tier, flooding the entire block. For some insane reason, the toilets just constantly have water running, like they are constantly flushing. Not sure if that's a common thing. But the dude came in, went to his cell, and immediately flooded the entire block while he was barricaded in his cell. Now the extraction unit came and stormed the unit, made everyone in the block lay face down in the floodwater, yes, the water from the toilet, which was legit 2 inches deep in the block, and they pepper sprayed the heck out of the dude's cell, which in turn meant that we all got pepper sprayed while laying belly down outstretched in toilet water. Now this was in Georgia, so it was legit 100+ degrees in the block, and everyone was covered in toilet water and pepper spray now. They drugged the dude out, everyone in the block was raging mad, with 12 dudes maybe in the block. The dude was back in the block 3 days later, and we were all still wearing the same jumpsuits because, well, jail sucks, and that's how it goes. Thank God for soap and showers. The dude promptly got his behind beat, was pulled from the block, I assume he was taken to medical, and he was fairly lumped up and bleeding. Was then brought back to the same block the same day, got his behind beat again, and after a second time, instead of moving him to another block, they locked him down in his cell. I was there for a month after that, and the dude never once was out of the cell. Like, no wreck, no nothing. They literally just locked him in the cell 24 hours a day. Another example of how to piss off your fellow inmates very quickly. Because after this guy calms down and is eventually let out of his solitary confinement, he will forever be remembered as the a-hole who flooded the pod. No one is ever going to treat him fairly again. He will probably have to watch his back constantly to avoid getting his butt kicked on a regular basis. If there was ever a time to reevaluate the prison's plumbing system and its faults, that would be a good one. Story 5. First day in jail, only time I've ever been and will ever go, that's for sure. Made the mistake of not keeping my stare in check at some dude's eyes. I kept eye screwing him, and any time that I'd get up from my chair in the pit, he'd come and put his coat down on my seat. I'm glad I never ate at the same time that he did, and he stared at my cell from his for a long time. Really screwed up. The doors click open for dinner, and my cellmate stayed asleep, and I went down myself and tried to do it all the right way, wore shoes, brought my cup down, kept to myself. And minutes later, he comes out and yells at the whole pod, "Where my cellmate at? Who's my cellmate in 215? I said, "Right here." And this guy was huge, and he towered over into my face. "You're just gonna let a brother starve in here?" And he was saying that I'm racist, and he's from Florida, and he doesn't know what it's like out here in my state. And someone else says, "That's some real stuff, though." I didn't know it was my job to let him know there was food. I owned up to it and said, "Hey, it's not like that. I'm not racist. I've just never been locked up before." A person at our table said, "You gonna punk him?" And he said no. I think they thought I couldn't understand them because their speech was so cryptic in a barely audible and mouthful kind of way, but maybe some people know what I'm talking about. Anyways, I got back into the cell and I apologized, saying, "Hey, I just didn't know." He said, "This is the first time you ever been locked up?" And I said, "Yeah." I apologized again, and he said, "Say no more, man." And I figured that meant literally, and I shut up after that. Story 6. Not prison, but jail. It was always dumb stuff that we would prank them on. One example is having someone get a look at their name on their wristband and then going to the phone like they were answering it. They would then yell the new guy's name and look around. The new guy would finally say, "That's me," and then the guy in the phone would say, "Oh, here, it's for you." When the new guy walked over and said hello, the whole pod would start laughing. You don't get phone calls in jail. Another was messing with new cellmates. One cellmate and I had been cellmates for a while, so when we got a third in our cell, we'd lay down a cell schedule for him with all ridiculous things, such as, hey, after lights out, we did 200 jumping jacks every Wednesday. Now we'd get to Wednesday and tell him to slide his portable bed under the bottom bunk and start doing jumping jacks and counting them off. They would 100% of the time join in, and they'd usually get to about 20 or so before we couldn't contain our laughter, and then explain that there is no such thing as a cell schedule or jumping jacks. One time I'd been in for about a year of 15 of a total 15 months and had some clout at that point. I'm not a hard guy, but can handle my own, and had only been in 2 necessary self-defense fights in that time. While more time in jail comes certain privileges. You get a better seat by the TV, you get into the front of the line for meals, etc. And a new guy came into the pod that day and I heard the door click open for food to be served, even though most people were already lined up after the announcement to line up. I went to the front and got my food first, as did others with much more time than most, and this is jail, not prison, so anything over a year is fairly long in the county I was in. Apparently this new guy didn't take too kindly to me specifically, going to the front. He started staring at me for the rest of the day, a mean mug, if you will. Now I took a shower, and when I got out, an inmate came up to me and told me that the new guy told him that he planned on just straight up sucker punching me. Now here's the thing, don't ever tell anyone that, especially if you're new and don't know anyone. I was well liked throughout the pod and didn't have problems with anyone, for the most part. I was generous to those who were hungry. I was a fine card player. I had a sense of humor and wasn't a hard guy. I didn't tolerate disrespect from race to race, and I sure as hell didn't plan on getting sucker punched. So I, in front of the whole pod, said, "Hey man, I hear you've got it in your head that you're going to sucker punch me. Is this true?" He said it's true. I politely asked him into myself for an actual fight, and I proceeded to beat the crap out of him. Like, he didn't get a single shot in on my face. His head and face were left bloodied and lumped. I will say that when the guards asked me what happened at dinner, he didn't say a word about me. I guess the dumb thing was that A, not respecting privileges that come with time, and B, thought a sucker punch was the answer and told somebody about it. Story 7. I was in Orange County Jail late 2009 and early 2010. When I was in there, I saw all sorts of crazy stuff. But one time, a guy rolled into the dorm downstairs from us. The way the dorms work is there are 64 men to a pod and there are 2 levels which are independent. We could see and interact with the floor below us, but only looking at a mirrored glass wall the cops watched us through. Anyways, a guy comes in around midnight, and when someone comes in, it makes quite a bit of noise sometimes, especially if the person isn't considerate. Now I'm still awake and I just happen to be sitting up, and I see the guy walk in and immediately put his bedroll on a bottom bunk near the entrance. This is a big no-no, as you usually are assigned a bunk by whoever's leading your race in the pod. Leader of the pod comes up to him and tells him to move to the top bunk. Now I'll never forget this dude. His name was Cyclone, and he was absolutely in the White Brotherhood type crowd. Anyways, words are exchanged, and the new guy is not taking it seriously. Cyclone braces himself between 2 bunks and lifts himself up, kind of like if you were to do dips, except that the bunks are fairly tall, and put his heel directly in the guy's face, knocking the new guy out cold. I mean, like dropping a 200-pound sack of potatoes. The cops come, turn on the lights, and made everyone downstairs show their knuckles. Now, the new guy didn't snitch on the guy who hit him and nothing happened, and the cops went away. 3 minutes later, everyone is complaining about a smell, and it turns out that the new guy shat his pants upon being knocked out. The pod leader ends up calling the sheriffs in to get a mop to clean up said crap, and the new guy ended up rolling out the next morning early, mysteriously. When the leader of your pod is named Cyclone, I feel like that's a dude that you need to listen to. I'm guessing he didn't get that name because he was a meteorologist in his previous life. This story goes to show you that it's not a glamorous job to work in a jail either. You'll probably end up cleaning some guy's crap on the floor. I'm 100% sure they don't get paid enough for that kind of torture. Hats off to the men and women who work in the jails because that's a difficult job for sure. Story 8. Oh man, this is my fave. Now my first day as well, 2014, it was a 30-day weekend sentence at the largest provincial prison in Quebec, called Bordeaux Prison. They house like 2,000 people for a max duration of 2 years minus a day. Since I was in school, they broke up my sentences into weekends. Lucky, especially as in Anglophone from Arizona. Yeah, long story. So my first day, I got to like a 40-foot red steel door. I knock, and a guard opens the shutter asking for my name. I give it, and my name isn't in the log. So he plays a prank on me saying that it normally means I don't have to stay, but with a short phone call, they confirm that this is my home for the weekend. Wrecked. We are put into groups of 10 going through security, similar to an airport luggage check. Some guys just got off a bus and are starting their lengthy sentences, and others are just doing the weekend thing like I was. This prison is a small world for Montreal lawbreakers. I enter the group room with one other dude that I heard is having his first day ever there, and I hear a guy shout out, "Bro, Sam, what are you doing here?" So now the guy I was coming in with knows a dude, and it's a guy that's been in there for 30 weekends so far. Now I feel really out of place. They're old school buddies, and yeah, Sam seemed relieved. The guards tell us to get up and let's go to the fun room. We get there, and it looks almost like getting in line for a roller coaster, 10 rows and 10 guards. Instead of it being bars, it's tile walls that are as high as my belly button maybe, and I'm 5'9". So they're like tile cubicles for the strip search. It's more to direct people, not so much to cover you from the other inmates seeing your goods, but yeah, anyways, we each walk into our tiled cubicle, and there's 9 male guards and 1 female. Now, I am a female, and I'm still not even sure that I feel better about that. The experienced 30 weekends guy is on my left, and Sam is on my right. He whispers over to Sam, "Just do as they say. They don't mess around. It's no biggie, trust me." Now, 30 weeks guy is told to open his mouth, lift his tongue, and then turn around and bend over. He does it. "Spread your cheeks," the guard says. He does it, and the officer goes in for a closer look. They rub from bottom up across your hole to see if there's a stash in there, and he turns around and the guard says, "Lift your testes," and he has a flashlight to check. I just got all my clothes off for this officer girl, and Sam is starting with the mouth part, and he passes. They go right to the balls first on Sam, though. They say, "Hey, please lift your testes," and he replies with, "No." Now, the 30 weeks guy looks over at me, and his eyes are wide open and whispers to Sam, "Lift your sack, bro." Now, it goes back and forth for a bit while tension is really rising, and all the guards start to leave each inmate during the check and walk over to his row as if something might go down. We're just a bunch of naked guys standing in a row with fairly large police-ranked guards closing in on Sam. His assigned guard says, "Last time, Samuel, lift your balls." Now, the 30 weeks guy is yelling at Sam to listen, I'm tripping out, and the other guys are laughing and enjoying the show. Sam yells back, "I don't lift my sack for no one." Now it escalates. 3 guards drop him to the floor. They put his hands behind his back while he's trying to wrestle his naked self out of it, and 2 more guards get in and one puts his knee on his head against the hard tile. Sam is screaming about killing them. One guard goes in and finger bangs him for the test. Everyone yells, "Oh!" like that meme from the movie Friday. They flip him over and slap his willy around and swipe the gooch. He's clean. They grab him by the arms and drag him out on his stomach while you can hear his balls getting tile burned on the ground. The combination of him screaming and the squeaking skin on tile is embedded in my head forever. They drag him through a giant thick metal door that is buzzed open, and now my heart is pounding. My guard walks back in front of me, and she starts off with, "Can you please?" and looks down. My sack is way wanked up. I think I've had my sack up the whole time. Now she laughs and grabs my stuff with a couple of squeezes and says, "Turn around," flashlights my hole, and doesn't even put a finger anywhere near me. She gets so close to me and says, "You're one of the good ones. Get dressed." See, I'd like to think she was talking about my goods, but who knows. We all get into jumpsuits and left through an entirely different door than the one that Sam was dragged through. I never saw Sam again. This was my first hour of my first day. Story 9. My brother is in prison again, probably for a long time. Of course, I already know about it all, but just reading how ruthless and violent a lot of the inmates are just makes me so mad. I worry that my brother fell down that hole 2 years ago and I'll never get the same guy that I remember back. Every time he got out of prison, he was more different than the last. More cold, less empathetic, less able to read the room, way more violent, to the point where it was difficult to talk to him. I don't think he's going to get out this time. Please try and stay out of jail, everyone. I know that sounds like a given, but you'd be surprised how many good people wrap themselves up in that kind of BS. My brother went to juvie for the first time at around 12 or 13 because my mother and his father were on medication. He had nobody to help him. So he turned to the people on the street. He had been out a total of 4 years since then, and he's now 28, as well as a father of 2 who his wife has had to raise. If you ever get caught up in illegal things, think about your loved ones. Think about your little sister, for example, who used to count down the days until you were released, visit you and bring you chocolates at 10 years old, and look forward to your release like a kid on Christmas morning, and then just to cry when you went back in a week later because you miss your brothers so much. Think about the fact that your loved ones will get you to the point where they kind of just give up on you, including your kids and your parents and whoever else, including your little sister, who is not so little anymore and just saw you on national television do a horrible thing that makes you feel completely embarrassed and ashamed. But you're used to it. They're going to have to stop caring about you for their own health and happiness, and that's a sad thing. So be careful out there. It's probably a good thing that most of us in life will never have any experiences similar to this, which we can relate to. But thankfully for these kinds of stories, it's a wise reminder about why we want to live law-abiding and fruitful lives. Now, all of us have someone who cares about us and counts on us, and the least we can do is stay out of prison. In the comments, does anyone have a family member or know someone who went through the system, and how did they handle things on the other side?